Hey guys, welcome to On the Table podcast. This is our weekly podcast discussion where we bring different Christians together to talk about matters that we're bringing to the table. We are joined with some amazing guests today. But first, I'm your host. I go by the name of Dave Creates. I'm an artist. I make music, all of that good stuff. I have two wonderful women beside me. What's your names, guys?
Hi guys, my name is Tamara. I'm 21, recently graduated from uni. Just excited to be here.
I'm Trudy. I'm part of the OGGM team and I'm just about to start a ministry training job.
That is fantastic. Well, the aim of our discussions each week is to help Christians not just know what to think, but also how to act in those ways as well. So we're going to get right into it. This week, our discussion is about youth churches. We're going to be talking about, that's right. We're going to be discussing about what they are and if they're actually effective.
Is there a need for them?
All of that good stuff. So as we start, I want to just ask you guys, how would you even define a youth church? Trudy?
I guess what comes to mind with this discussion is more about churches that are just made up of predominantly one generation. So youth churches, I guess young adult churches, we could call them.
Yeah.
So churches that I guess are branded, people would think that this church is a church for young adults, which, yeah.
Okay, interesting. How about yourself, Tamara?
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I'd say a church that specifically targets young adults, the brand is all about just young people, and they, I guess, do certain things to make sure that they attract that audience.
That's good. I think even for me as well, I think when I hear youth church, coming from, for me, being born in and raised in a church, pretty much, you hear of Sunday school, you hear of the main service. Youth church was a very different concept I was introduced to probably at uni, and obviously you have a lot of uni students, so the demographic for certain areas, or as in a certain student village, for example, the church is going to be mostly students, so people will just say, oh, that's the youth church. But even some broader, bigger churches have the youth department, and they'll call that the youth church. So I guess there are different kind of definitions in that sense. But let's just get into it. So what do you guys think of that statement in general and the concept of youth churches? Have you guys been in any before? What's been your experiences?
Okay, I'll go first. My opinion on youth churches and young adult churches has definitely changed over the years. I think when I started university, I was I'm completely for them. Yeah. It just makes sense. We're all students. We're all in the same space of life. It makes sense for us to have a place where we can gather, do all of the things that you'd regularly do at church, but have it do it with people that you kind of relate with on that sense. I guess my experience has been I was part of a youth ministry for about 2 years, and my home church in London, they have a young adult church as well. So I've been involved with them for the past few years.
Okay, cool. We can dig into that a bit more later on. Trudy, yourself, what about you?
Yeah, so I've never been part of a quote-unquote youth church. I didn't grow up in church, but my experience of being in a church in my 5 years of being in church, well, just under, I've gone to 2 different churches. They've both been multi-generational, and when I did an internship in America, that was also a multi-generational church. I would say that that wasn't my intention when finding a church necessarily, but I'm really glad that it turned out to be that way. And now that I've experienced the benefits of being in a multi-generational church, I think I would never ever consider being in a church which was predominantly just one demographic.
Yeah, I hear that.
I understand that. Even for me, I think growing up in a church, again, which is multi-generational, having different age groups as well, and I guess it's helpful to kind of learn from those older than you and even help those who are younger than you, being in that kind of environment. Going to uni was where I was around a lot more people my age. I went to a university that was more of a student city, so most of the people there were pretty much youth for that phrase. But I think we still had a lot of adults and older families and stuff like that, which was really helpful. I'm in a position now where my church is still a multi-generational church, but it's core demographic is young adults. So even seeing how that is very different to how things have been in my previous church environments and how that maybe affects things is quite interesting. But even to ask you guys, do you think it's biblical having a youth church? Like, based on how we've kind of defined it, looking at how the early church was as well. Do you feel like there are similarities or?
This is a really sticky one.
Okay.
Okay, I'd say looking at what the early church looked like, they didn't target a specific demographic. The church was just the church, and it was made up of all types of people. People from different ethnicities, different ages, all sorts of backgrounds. So I guess going by that definition, then no, young adult churches and youth churches aren't biblical, because they are targeting one specific demographic. That's what I'd say.
Okay. How do you think about that?
I think like Tamara said about the early church and how it was diverse, I think like churches should reflect the demographic in the local community that they are in. So I think, for example, if you're in London, why are you not part of a multi-generational, ethnically diverse church? Because that reflects like what the population of London is. And then also going back to the Bible, just when it speaks about like spiritual gifts, and you know, we're all called to ministry in some sort of capacity. And I think that you can use those gifts. You can explore the gifts better in a multi-generational church. For example, how are you going to know if perhaps you're called to children's ministry if there's no children in your church to serve? Or how are you going to know if you're called to women's ministry if the oldest woman in your church is 27? And I guess also in terms of like a biblical call to discipleship, which I guess we can talk about later, unpack that more. But I think also that would require there to be people of different age groups in any church.
Even on that point, just to kind of press in further, if you are in a certain space like a university, and even say like a small university town where there isn't just a lot of people in general, you're going to be limited, right, in terms of who's going to be around. How do you feel like churches can better deal with those situations where you might not have like an older couple to help disciple the young women or the young men? How do you think that could work?
That is a great question. I haven't thought about that too much, but I guess what comes to mind at first is like, in beginning, when starting that church, if a church is being planted, it's probably not usually going to be just like one person or one couple that is starting that church off. And I think that's something that they could think about in the beginning, and like making sure that there is like a core leadership team of enough people to be able to train people in the way they should go. But I haven't thought about that too much.
I have a question.
Go for it.
So how do you feel about like young adult churches that are partnered with like a bigger church that is multi-generational? Is that can that still work? Is that still okay?
That's a good cue, because so that's been sort of my experience at university. I was part of I guess a branch that the main church, they had like, you know, the multi-generational church, and they would have the youth church, as it were, in the evening. So that was more targeted for students. It was in the afternoon. You know, students typically don't want to get up early, but it was still had the older people around in terms of the general infrastructure of the church. So I think in that sense, I think it works, I believe, because it's like you still have the wider stewardship. But again, I do think it just depends on every situation. Like in general, I agree in terms of how it's important that we have older people around who have been in the faith for longer, who are able to kind of help give that pastoral care in ways that a younger person who might be zealous and might have a lot of knowledge, but life will teach you certain things that you might not be able to see as a younger person. Hence, I do think it's important to have, you know, multi-generations, but again, you still can be limited to what you have in terms of a particular community. But it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that, Trudy.
In terms of what you said, I think it's definitely better than churches that aren't part of like a like parent church or whatever you'd call it, because there's that leadership and accountability that comes in from there. But I still think like there's a difference between having a separate space for, like, it's a completely separate church, like as in the members aren't attending the church the morning service too. Like I've been part, for example, when I was in America for a few months, the church had young adult service once a week, and it was great. There was like 300 plus people that would come along to that. There was a strong young adult community, but they were still part of the wider church. They were still coming on Sunday mornings to a main service with all generations. They were still serving in children's ministry, and they were still attending midweek with older men and women. So I think like that's healthy and beneficial, because we do need spaces where we can like fellowship with people in our own life stage as well. So I think that's really important. But I think I would still say churches that claim, oh no, we are part of a main church, we're not separate, but if you're not interacting, if you don't know like any of the adults in that main service, like, are you really part of like that bigger church, or are they just two separate churches entirely?
I hear that.
Go for it.
So a scenario, right? Say there's a young person, they've just moved to university, and their local church is just filled with 40 and 50 year olds. They're the youngest person there by like 20, 30 years. What would you say to them then? Like, would you say still go because this is what the church is about, or would you maybe suggest that they look for a church that represents them better, I guess?
That's a good question. I think, of course, again, every situation is different. Ultimately, church isn't just somewhere you go to like please yourself and to like, as much as community, I'm big on community. I think it's so key, and it's important to have people that look like you. But God might place you in a situation where not everybody looks like you, and maybe you're the difference that the church needs. It could be your age, your youthfulness that brings a certain grace that the church hasn't had before. And it's also a position where you can now learn from them. Of course, it's hard. I've been in positions where I've been in, say, a church situation where the community isn't there as much, and it's hard. It can be hard to kind of grow, because when you're with people who are similar to you, like there's a certain energy that's there that helps things in a deeper way. But at the same time, I know of people who are in situations where they're in a church demographic where the age gap is a lot, and it's like doing things like going out and getting a coffee. It's still great with someone older, but it's just a different kind of connection. So that can have its tensions, but even that tension is still space for growth. So I think it's looking at the wider context of like my relationship with Christ. Not everything is going to be pleasurable. Certain things are going to be hard, but it's going to help me to become more like Jesus. So looking at it from that perspective. But what do you guys say?
That's great. I think I agree with what you said, really. And what came to my mind is, of course, explore other churches as well. Like, you might fit in better in a different church setting. There's hopefully more than one church in one given area. But I think, let's say there was a church, and the only church you found in the area that has the same like doctrinal views as you, that you think they're preaching from the Bible, that you think you're going to get opportunities to serve, that you think you're going to get mentorship, and that happens to be a church where there isn't really people your age, I would say hopefully, especially like in a university setting, there'll be alternate ways to fellowship with other believers. Like you have campus societies, or like for me, like OGGM events. Like my current church now, I would say it is multi-generational, but people my age group is probably like the least prominent demographic. There's a lot of younger people to serve and like older people to learn from, but my age group, there's probably less of that. There is still some young adults, but I guess then for me, like, I'm just grateful that we have like OGGM, for example, where they do have events where I can outside of church have like people to do life with.
Even to jump in on that, I feel like my church is quite opposite in a sense. Again, it's like a multi-generational church in the sense everyone's welcome, but our core demographic is very much young professionals, people just out of uni, or even students as well. But at the same time, we do have some older people there, and it's amazing how great it is to have that fresh perspective on certain things. And even like we're in central London, so there's a lot of tourists that come through as well. So we do see a lot of families, and just even seeing just the benefits of having different types of people around. You realize that it's very important, especially for growth over a period of time. But
and can I just jump in on that?
Go for it.
I think one of the beautiful things about having a multi-generational church is that there's a real sense of family. Because let's say like I have quite a few friends that are from like broken homes, for example, where they might not have a good mother figure or a good fatherly figure, but in the church there are so many people that you can kind of look up to, and even like with my family, we've taken some people in, they've kind of become like siblings to us. And I think that's just the beautiful thing about having different ages within a church. And I think that's what God's vision is for his church, you know.
That's so good.
You go. That's all right.
I want to shift the conversation slightly now to talk about kind of juxtaposing how things were in the early church with today. Obviously we have social media right now, which changes everything. The world of marketing, where, you know, it's your IG page looking fresh, it's everything coming correct, and churches can now use these tools as a way of reaching new people, which can be great if used wisely, but then the question is really, should churches be like intentionally targeting certain groups of people? Do we feel like churches who are targeting, say, you know, young professionals just as their core demographic, is that a good thing? What do you guys think?
I think it goes back to like what I said at the beginning of how a church should reflect the demographic of the community that they're part of. So I think if you are in an area where you have people of all age groups, like all religious backgrounds, all, I don't know, different cultures, like, why would you only target one small like subsection of that culture? Like, why would you only target young adults when young adults make up such a small percentage of like the community?
Okay, what do you think, Tamara?
I think social media and the church is an interesting one.
That's a whole podcast episode in itself.
That's a whole thing. But I would say one of the dangers, I think, is that we can sometimes turn church into like a marketing scheme. You know?
Talk about it.
Like I've seen a lot where, I don't know, don't want to get too into it, but like, I don't know, it almost turns church into like, I don't know how to put it.
Like a social club.
A social club. Like
people want to go where the hype is.
That's what I'm trying to say. Where the hype is, like you're trying to create a certain image because you want to seem like you're cool and all of that. And I mean, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong in it, but I think it can very easily become something that it just shouldn't with regards to church. So
Question on that: if you do have a church which is more charismatic and is more vibrant, all you post is naturally going to become more appealing to younger people. So do you think it's the onus is on like those in charge to like maybe balance how they share stuff, or do you think that you just be free with what you're posting and like, you know, just free the realness in that sense? Or how do you think that churches should be more wise with those things?
I think like there's other ways to reach people aside from social media as well. So I think to an extent it's okay if like the social media is kind of branded towards younger people, because like I think a 50-year-old, I might just be speaking generally, I haven't asked any, but when they are searching for a church, their first point of call probably isn't going to be to go and look on the social media page, whereas like for us it might be like I know I do that, but I don't know, they might look at a website or like Google reviews, and therefore like I think those spaces shouldn't necessarily, I don't know how, I haven't thought about it, but I think there's different ways to reach people of like even outreaches, like when you're doing evangelism, for example, which churches should do.
Of course.
Are you only speaking to young people, or are you trying to speak to adults too? Well, I mean, we are adults, I mean, like you know what I mean.
I think it's an interesting point, because even from a marketing, so I work in like advertising and marketing, that's just my day job, so that those decisions in terms of like who you're targeting, it's important things to think about. If you're running like a paid ad, for example, you might want to like key in on like a certain age group, so decisions there might affect who's going to be seeing your post and then who comes to your church. So I do think it's important to think about these things, but of course think about the bigger picture. As you said, truly, like evangelism is not just online, it's on the streets, it's in the coffee shop, it's on the train, it's all of these different things. So I guess it's asking ourselves, are we only speaking to people who look like us about Jesus, and are we willing to kind of step outside of that and just reach people as Jesus would have? Which leads me to my next question: would Jesus attend the youth church?
Oh my gosh, crazy stuff. I'd say no.
Why's that?
Wait, no, I don't know what Jesus would do, but I think if Jesus were here, I would say he'd probably encourage us to step out of this, you know.
Why would he do that?
Because he died for everyone, right? He came to save the lost, and the lost isn't just young people. There are so many people. Okay, let's say there's a church here, right? Right here. Just because, I don't know, 70% of the population in that area is young adults, there's still that 30% that's not, right?
You're right.
Do we not care about them too?
That's good.
So I would say Jesus would encourage us to step out.
Okay, cool. How about you, Trudy?
Yeah, just what Tamara said. Like, I feel like it's not even a thing Jesus would think about, like, because he was for everyone. Like, it just wasn't in his mind. Like, he was trying to reach everyone. Like, he's telling the disciples to go and make disciples of all nations. Like, he's not thinking, I need to target this group or this group. It's like, nope, go like everyone.
That's good. And I guess even seeing how Jesus was back in the day, obviously still here today, but in the sense of he would be in the places of worship, then he would be on the streets, like, and he would reach those who were almost the others in terms of in society, those who people wouldn't normally consider. So you're right, you had a holistic view of these things, which we need to make sure we have. But I think still have space for being wise. If we are in a space where maybe we feel like students aren't being targeted enough, the youth isn't being targeted enough, it's important that we step up in that area 100%. Too and do more. But I think even as someone who's like moving from early 20s to late 20s, gosh, that was weird saying that. But it's like I'm realizing how, you know, when I was a younger person, there's certain things that we had at outreach, is like the barbecues and all of these things. And as an older person now, you might not always want to do all of those kind of things. You might want to have a different approach. So seeing how I've been going through life has helped me to see, okay, how can we apply this to other people as well, which is interesting.
I've got a question for you guys. Oh, was you going to say something?
No,
okay,
cool,
cool. Like, coming from like what we'd call a youth church here, what do you guys think are some of the limitations of them from your experiences?
That's good.
That's a deep question. I think the biggest one, I think I mentioned it earlier, is just that family unit thing is just missing, I think. And it's so important. I think just having older people that you can reach out to, older people that you can, spend the Saturday with, or like just, help with the kids or something. Like, I think there's just something so beautiful about that. And then I think another limitation is when it comes to teaching the word, right? I think there's so much value in having people that have walked in the faith, have been trained, know how to divide the word correctly, all of that. I think that is essential to a church. And I think if not done correctly, it can actually be damaging if you don't have that.
That's good. I'd even add, just as you said, discipleship. We see in, like, say how Paul speaks to Timothy in the gospel, in the New Testament, about just that he's set a certain example, and he's saying, like, follow my example. And when we have that in the church environment of, like, the older people setting that example and younger people following that in that way, that's where we can grow in a deeply. So it's just looking at discipleship. It's just also understanding even service, looking after like a 5-year-old is a different experience to like someone your age, and it teaches you a lot about forgiveness, about patience. So I think it's just in a multi-generational environment, there's so much opportunity to like grow holistically as a Christian.
That's good.
Which is important too.
I think that even though I've not been part of a young adult church as such, I think some of the benefits I've seen, the main benefits I've seen of a multi-generational church are what you guys have spoke about, discipleship. I mean, one of my favourite things about America, which I know will stick with me forever, was there's women who have been walking with Jesus for 20, 30, 40 years, as women who have walked with Jesus through their children having cancer, losing their husbands, through divorce, through all kinds of things, and just like they just have so many stories of God's faithfulness, and it's like you're not going to find that in a church where we're all in our 20s, none of us have families and stuff. Like it would just stick with me forever. And then I just think about like one of my favorite themes in the Bible is like imitating faith, and it's just like I think it's Hebrews 13 where it's like remember your leaders who are before you and imitate their faith. I might be paraphrasing, but something like that is like I love having examples of people who you know, God's faithfulness is so evident in their lives, and it's like, how can I be like that? How can I imitate them? People to take you under their wing and teach you the ropes in different areas of ministry. And like, another scripture that comes to mind is in Titus 2, when it speaks about like older women should train the younger women how to love their husbands and stuff. And it's just, which older women are going to be teaching you in a church which is predominantly young adults? And I know, like, for example, you said that you have a lot of visitors that are you know, families and stuff, but it's like, they're not people necessarily that you can walk with and rub shoulders with and imitate.
And even for just at general context, like, my church is part of like a wider collection of churches, so there's certainly like other older people there that kind of give that pastoral care and stuff. But no, I agree with what you're saying. But even as we come to a close, it's been great talking to you guys. Any like closing thoughts, anything that really stood out from this conversation you want to kind of speak on?
I have a closing thought, but I want to word it exactly. Like, I read this and I was like, this is great. So my closing thought is, a strong church learns from the past whilst preparing for the future. And I think that requires a multi-generational church.
Amazing. Thank you, Trudy. Tamara?
Yeah, I would just say, like, a word of encouragement to anyone, any young people that might be in young adult churches that are feeling like, maybe this isn't for me, maybe I'm not growing as much as I thought I would, or maybe I need older women or men in my life. I would encourage you to step out, you know, pray about it, obviously, pray about it, seek wise counsel, because there is so much more to the church than just young people.
Great. Well, guys, thank you for joining us on the Table podcast.
Thank you.
I'm your host, Dave Creates, and we'll, you know, if you have any other comments, please let us know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.